Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Olson, how many people have been charged with crimes of violence in connection with the events on January 6th?
Senator, I'm not sure exactly how many have been charged with crimes of violence. I know that there are many.
How many have been charged with nonviolent crimes?
I don't have the numbers of people charged, whether at the state or federal level. I know that there
How many people are currently incarcerated concerning the events of January 6th?
I don't know the number of people incarcerated. Again, I know that
Okay, let me ask you that. Look, we have limited time, so I don't want you to filibuster. You either know the answer or you don't. How many people have been placed in solitary confinement concerning the events of January 6th?
I don't have any information about that, Senator.
You know, Mr. Olson, I will say it was sad. Senator Lee just asked you about this. Back in June of 2021, Senator Lee and I and two other senators sent a letter to the Department of Justice asking these questions, asking about the differential prosecutions. Let me ask you, during 2020, Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots all across the country, there were over 700 police officers injured by Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots. How many people have been charged with crimes of violence concerning those riots all across the country?
I don't have information on how many. I would say, you know, hundreds of people have been charged, as Ms. Sanborn.
You would say, but you don't know. You know, when we asked you why the Biden Department of Justice has such wildly disparate standards going after January 6th, targeting some people who committed crimes of violence, and anyone who commits crimes of violence should be prosecuted, but also targeting a lot of nonviolent individuals, we asked you, why is it that you won't target the rioters and terrorists who firebomb cities across this country? The answer we got from the Department of Justice was shameful. On October 22nd, you came back and said, quote, "The department has dedicated investigative and prosecutorial resources commensurate with the significance of these events." By significance, I guess it means the political benefit to the Biden White House. And I will tell you, there are a great many Americans who are understandably deeply concerned about the politicization of the Department of Justice under President Joe Biden. It has been 218 days since we sent you that letter. DOJ refused to answer the letter. Today, when Senator Lee and I asked you about it, your answer to every damn question is, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. You're under oath. You may believe at the Department of Justice that you are unaccountable to the American people, but that is not the case, and the wildly disparate standards are unacceptable. Ms. Sanborn, I want to turn to the FBI. How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Ms. Sanborn, who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
Well, there are a lot of people who are understandably very concerned about Mr. Epps. On the night of January 5th, 2021, Epps wandered around the crowd that had gathered, and there's video out there of him chanting, "Tomorrow, we need to get into the Capitol, into the Capitol." This was strange behavior, so strange that the crowd began chanting, "Fed, Fed, 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 Fed." Ms. Sanborn, was Ray Epps a Fed?
Sir, I cannot answer that question.
The next day, on January 6th, Mr. Epps is seen whispering to a person, and 5 seconds later, 5 seconds after he's whispering to a person, that same person begins to forcibly tear down the barricades. Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir, Similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
Shortly thereafter, the FBI put out a public post seeking information on individuals connected with violent crimes on January 6th. Among those individuals, in the bottom there, is Mr. Epps. The FBI publicly asked for information, offering cash rewards for information leading to the arrest. This was posted, and then, sometime later, magically, Mr. Epps disappeared from the public posting. According to public records, Mr. Epps has not been charged with anything. No one's explained why a person videoed urging people to go to the Capitol, a person whose conduct was so suspect the crowd believed he was a Fed, would magically disappear from the list of people the FBI was looking at. Ms. Sanborn, a lot of Americans are concerned that the federal government deliberately encouraged illegal and violent conduct on January 6th. My question to you, and this is not an ordinary law enforcement question, this is a question of public accountability. Did federal agents or those in service of federal agent actively encourage violent and criminal conduct on January 6th?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure the witnesses can hear me well enough so I won't have to shout. Sometimes, you know, there are two sides to a story, but that just doesn't hold true for the events of January 6th and the threat of domestic terrorism we face today. The violent attack of January 6th was perpetrated in significant part by domestic violent extremists espousing white supremacist and anti-government ideologies. No matter how we want to shape questions, that is a fact. Those who promote these same dangerous ideologies are the most lethal threats we face as a country and as a democracy today. As a former prosecutor, I can tell you I feel violent extremism in any form is unacceptable, and I've so prosecuted it that way. But downplaying or distracting from the most clear and present danger we have facing all Americans creates a real danger to the United States. Now, last week, we have to come together as members of the Senate and face reality and the truth. Last week, I asked U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger what would happen if the Capitol Police were held to last year's fiscal year's funding levels and did not receive increased funding as part of the fiscal year 2022 funding package. He told me it would seriously undermine the ability of the Capitol Police in every way to protect the Capitol. Now, addressing domestic terrorism is a major focus of President Biden's Justice Department FY 22 budget request. The Senate Appropriations Committee has released a bill that would dramatically increase that funding to respond to the dangers. So I'd ask this question, Mr. Olson, if Congress fails to enact these funding increases for fiscal year 22, how would it impact the department's ability to comprehensively respond to the domestic terrorism threats we face?
Thank you, Senator Lee. I know that the Department of Justice and the administration has submitted a budget request asking for additional resources. And obviously, those resources are being requested because we view those as essential to being able to carry out our mission. So I would just refer you to the submissions from the Justice Department and the President on our budget requests in connection with those appropriations.
And thank you. And Ms. Sanborn, it's good to see you again. I'm one of the ones that's been here long enough to remember when you were a Senate page, and I appreciate the things you've accomplished since then. But can you answer the same question I asked Mr. Olson about these funding increases from the FBI's perspective?
Yes, sir. I am aware that we have requested a budget enhancement. Right now, we use the resources we have and cover down with what we have. But as alluded to by Mr. Olson, we have requested an enhancement specifically for domestic violent extremism.
Thank you. In your testimony discusses the concrete steps the Justice Department, Justice First, to Mr. Olson, and then Ms. Sanborn. You talk about the concrete steps the Justice Department has taken to implement the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. And one critical pillar of that involves confronting the long-term contributors to domestic terrorism, finding ways to counter the influence of dangerous conspiracy theories online, and setting a tone from the highest rank of government. We know that domestic violent extremists pay attention to the rhetoric of political leaders. That includes, for example, the rhetoric calling the jailed January 6th rioters political prisoners, which sends a signal they did nothing illegal. That frightens me. And so, Mr. Olson and Ms. Sanborn, how does misleading political rhetoric and misinformation impact the thinking and actions of domestic violent extremists? Does it impact recruitment and mobilization by these activists? And that's my final question.
I'll give a brief answer and refer to Ms. Sanborn, but there's no doubt that misinformation, disinformation, false narratives, as the intelligence community has assessed, are available online to violent extremists. Again, whether that's domestic violent extremists or those who may be influenced by international terrorist groups. And the internet and the availability of social media can be an accelerant to an individual's movement, as you mentioned, Senator, from simply being susceptible to those messages to being further radicalized and eventually to being mobilized to violence. And we've seen this same pattern occur in both the international terrorism context when it comes to ISIS and their propaganda, as we've seen on the domestic violent extremist side with regard to domestic political and social influences. So it's a significant problem.
Did Ms. Sanborn wish to add?
Yes, sir. I would agree with that. Bottom line is violent extremist material on the internet reaches those vulnerable to recruitment. And so we're concerned about that on the quote unquote misinformation. We know our adversaries would do whatever they could to include misinformation to sow discord.